we can joke about it. I know I caught the end of the panel, and a lot of the jokes was, do I just start this in Mandarin? You know, monolingual people here. So I'm Andrew Woodruff. Do I just click to start this? Sorry. I'm Andrew Woodruff. I'm the Senior VP of Product and Business Development at IGG, as well as the producer. Here to talk about a pretty pompous subject, how to succeed on a global scale. One of the things I wanted to go through, I've had 10 years experience in the global industry, in China, and I've worked in all facets, marketing, advertising, operations, branding, design, and now I'm back into being a producer and part of the design team. It's great to kind of bring everything together. I like to kind of put in my background where I used to be in charge of a Chinese dev team making a Chinese game for the Chinese market. So yeah, get the white guy to do that. It's kind of a seriously weird idea. So I have to hit it harder. No? Okay, got it. Who are we? What we find out a lot about in Vancouver is nobody knows who we are. We know that when other studios close and we try to interview people and they're like, who are you? We're better known for our games, but a little bit on us. We were founded in 2006. We were listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange 2013. We opened our office in Vancouver in early 2014. We currently globally have about 1,000 people. We have 300 million player accounts, 18 million monthly active users. On the App Annie publisher rankings, we were ranked 34th. Closer to home, we were ranked 17th between Blizzard and Glue on the Pocket Gamer developer for 2016, yeah, okay. And we just celebrated our 10th year anniversary. So we've been around a while, but nobody's heard of us. One of the things, we started as a publisher back in 2006, and we quickly realized that there was an issue. We couldn't get quality games, because we were based in China, we started in China, we couldn't get the quality games, so we soon realized that we needed to develop our own games, and that was the browser game era, so we started with client games, and then we finally moved into browser games, and we actually had our first success with Galaxy Online 2. Launched in 2010, still running until today, still making money, so it's kind of quite a big accomplishment there. And then we already, pretty early on, determined that we needed to move into mobile, and so by 2013, we actually had over 80% of our revenue in mobile. So we were really quick in there from our browser and client era. And our big hit, Castle Clash, is still out there. We've celebrated a long 2 years with it. But really, we are really global. We're everywhere. We're in Canada, USA, South Korea, Japan, China, Thailand, Singapore, Philippines. We're really everywhere. We just opened an office in Belarus a month ago. So we're putting in the resources to be there. How you'd know us, I'm not going to read through all this. This is kind of a data dump on everyone here. But I wanted to point out that we have games in so many different languages. Castle Clash is in 15 languages. We've been in the top 10, sometimes in the top 1 in several different geographies. Lords Mobile we launched 3 months ago, and it's in 16 languages, and we'll be launching in other languages shortly too. And it's also in the top 50 in several of the geos, also really up there for some reason, Vietnam. We're really putting in a lot of resources there. A couple of our other older games, Clash of Lords 2, 12 languages, also ranked top 50 in quite a lot of different geographies. Deck Heroes, a little bit of a detractor from the other games. It's a CCG, so a little harder to rank, but we're still up there in the top 100 in a lot of the different areas. And then kind of back to us in Canada. You can see this art's a little bit different from some of the art that we have in our other games. This actually, I sent it to a colleague before we did this talk, and he said, you have to remove these pictures, they're not our game. They're not part of our company, so they're still here. This is actually this is a game that we're working on more locally. It's post-apocalyptic. It's not as cute as other games that we have. We're here in beautiful Vancouver. I'd be remiss to say that we're hiring. That's why we came to this conference. And you can see we more recently donated $100,000 to the wildfires that happened across Canada to the Red Cross. So I had to talk a little bit about working in China. I had worked there for 10 years. Just wanted to go through some funny anecdotes here. I remember one of the first companies I worked for called NetDragon. They used to be really big across the world, but they had an interesting thing. I remember I was working on a very Gundam rip-off game called Zero Online, and they were putting a panda in there, and it was going to drop presents. And I kept on asking, is it at least a mechatronic panda, or is it going to be cool? No, it's a panda. And I was like, okay, well, this is a little weird. Why are we doing it? China's national treasure. It's not an answer, but it was in there. The players were happy. They got extra stuff. But in another instance, I remember grabbing another game. I was more on the marketing side. They called it Zombies Ate My Pizza. And I started playing it, played it a couple hours, turned around, and I was like, hey, wait a minute. I saw the zombies. I'm fighting the zombies, but where's this damn pizza? And it turned out, I asked the project manager, he's like, there's no pizza. I'm like, why is it called pizza? I'm like, don't worry about it. And the last example was kind of more on the VIP side of everything. I'm sure you're all familiar with how in Asian developed games, a lot of them have these crazy VIP systems that really show off, and it's like wearing a really expensive brand, and you really want to show off. And I remember in most of the games you have these VIP systems with titles, and some of the RPG games would have these title systems where every single level you had this new title on top of it. So you'd have these like 3 or 4 people running across screen with like 15 titles on there. And you're like, what's going on? I can't even see anything. Those are a bunch of the things that we had to change in all the companies I was at. We had to develop ways that Western players would accept them, because you don't need to have a whole screen of names. It's silly. So it was still a very positive experience being in China. There's a lot of different angles for how people do things, but yeah, it's very interesting. Now here, why we're here, it's East meets West, right? One thing is that IGG is and was a very Chinese company. And how did we get over being it? Well, we really became a truly multicultural approach to both our development and our publishing. We really needed to expand into new geographies and new locations by putting in the resources. We didn't just randomly go, okay, now let's put this through Google Translate and see what happens. I've seen that happen pretty often. It doesn't work. So I know that a bunch of the people have talked about all sorts of different aspects of what is an Eastern dev, what is a Western dev, but I'll just go through these points really quickly. The pros for being an Eastern dev is there's a very mature free-to-play design. Nobody's scared of it. It's there. I wanted to teach everyone one word in Chinese that you have to understand when you're dealing with Chinese devs, and that's wakeng. It's the idea of a bottomless pit for a design. You know, a lot of Western devs, they put a limit to what you can spend. But in China, you need to make a design that you could throw your wallet in and it would never end. And that's called wakeng. So you've learned a little bit of Chinese well here. So it's a very fast-paced development. There's no cultural stigma against free-to-play. They actually kind of shy away. Oh, I have to pay for that? Why would I do that? And there's a really big tolerance for repetition and complexity. You see one game comes out, 150 other games come out within a few days. Again, the design isn't very player-focused. It's not as fun for the player, but they try to get as much money as possible in these designs. And that's the next point here. There's a focus on short-term gains as opposed to the longer-term player lifetime value. Does anyone here know how long a typical Chinese platform will put a game up before taking it down? Anyone, you could just shout it out. 3 days. If it doesn't make a profit in 3 days, it's over. Let's take it right down. You can't complain, it's just gone. So that's one of the issues with publishing in China. You're not given the light of day, just gone. 3 days, that's how fast it is. And of course there's the serious IP issues. So Western devs. We focus on a lot more of the player experience as opposed to some of the more wakeng designs. Planning and development methodology, I've seen it a little bit more forgiving. People aren't killing themselves doing overtime. There's a stronger understanding of appealing UI, UX, and there's a longer-term plan for success. I know some of the profit and loss analysis that I've seen in some other companies are planning an 8-month for a return. So 3 days, 8 months, it's a huge difference. And there's decisions being made across multiple channels. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here because we're all here, but unfortunately I find that there's a huge issue with the reluctance in adopting or adapting to the free-to-play style. There's still that stigma, and sometimes we're like, oh, well, it's made here, everyone can accept it. And then, oh, it doesn't do very bad. It doesn't do very well there. So what have we learned? Well, we were always in the free-to-play market, so it wasn't hard for us to stay in it. My suggestion is to adopt it and embrace it. I know that's why we're all here. Players are willing to spend. So from the free-to-play design, I know people are throwing out different words, throughout different ones, but I like to use the word engaging. Games need to be more engaging for the players. It can't just be a random whack-hung design. And then I had to go back, I had to say this again. The UI and UX is terrible in China. It's really bad, and we're still learning about this. So we still are working internally to deal with this. What have we done? And I've used this as an interesting term. I know investment, a lot of people are thinking money here, but we need to invest in resources. We've done that. We have talent across a lot of offices. Instead of hiring that guy that had 3 years of experience in a German university that's from China, we hired the German guy that speaks German, that knows the German market to really break in there. Localization versus translation. Can't stress that enough. If you looked, why I brought up the fact that like Lords Mobile is in 17 or 16 languages, we didn't have 17 different versions. I know that we were talking a little bit during the panel about the idea of breaking the build and having different versions. Well, that can't happen if you have 17 different versions. And so you have to plan out a UI that actually can fit all these different languages. My go-to is German, because German can be really, really long, or Russian. So if Russian and German fits, we're good. Then again, I know this is the worst art we could possibly put on for this point, but art with wide appeal. A lot of our games have an appeal that can match any market. I just like this because it's what we've done here at the IGG Canada office. And then kind of moving on, we have IGG is quite big. As I said, we have 1,000 people. We spread risk by having 20 plus games in development at any point. Now that means in a market that keeps on shifting and changing, if it changes and we don't hit it, we hope that at least one of the others does. So that's where there needs to be emphasis on making sure that you have to think ahead, make sure that you're hitting the right market. Or if it changes underneath you. From an operations perspective, I think the only way to do it is to do it at a global level. As I said, if you plan out properly, you should be able to get it done. You have to build up the scope and scale. We have that operations department, so you can put it in and be able to deal with it. I would suggest doing it yourself, having like 20% here, 30% here, going to all the different platforms in between. You're not going to be able to get the momentum to move forward. DevOps is a huge thing. If you have a publisher in between you, are you really learning what the player needs and respects in order to move to improve the game? So having a closer tie between your operations and customer support with the developer is a huge advantage in creating a better game. The other thing here is localized events. One thing is in China, players would rather have bonus. So you say, okay, in this event you get 100% more. But in a lot of the Western-based cultures, like look at Steam, you look at the sales, it's all percentage-based. Oh, you get 30% off. Black Friday, for example, it's not bonuses, it's discount. So these are things that you need to do when you localize your events, because if you did a discounted service in China, they just wouldn't care. Marketing, I think we all know you have to spend the money. I think we have that. Luckily at IGG we have the money to spend, but you just have to do it. From localized promotions, we, for example, in Russia, printed things right on water bottles and distributed them, so people could use a QR code or something in that similar fashion in order to get things in our game, to trying it out, because different markets have different ways of finding out or wanting to get involved with your games. So, kind of the takeaways here. It's a constantly changing market. I think it's great that players are accepting more and more discerning of it's harder games, more mid-core, especially the harder core versions of mobile games. And this is leading on the dev side to longer dev cycles. So you're having to put in a lot more investment on that or hitting that market. You have to identify the future trends. So where are things going? Are we actually going to waste millions of dollars moving in the wrong direction? It's not going to happen, hopefully. New generations of gameplay, so being different, being the first mover. Imitating isn't enough. We all know that. I know this is kind of a moot point, but you need to be new. You need to be in the market first. One of our advantages with Castle Clash, even though there's still a lot of similarities with Clash of Clans, we added heroes. We added a lot of new innovations to it, and we were also first to Android, first to Russia, first to a lot of different areas, which gave us the advantage. Again, we're here in the East meets West track. East and West need to meet. Think of the product first, take the advantages of both sides, and again, back to my point, investing in resources is a must in order to build up your momentum to push forward. This is our game that we're doing in IGG Canada. Kind of good to end on, but thank you. If you want to connect with us, these are our contact details. Any questions?
Very brief, you kind of got me over any questions? Come on. This is the question period. Okay, I will stand beside you.
Okay.
Come up with a question. So you were presumably watching our previous panel. We're talking about the kind of the different issues, and we were talking mainly about studios that are working in one area where you obviously have successfully managed the cross to some degree.
Some degree, yeah.
I guess from an advice perspective, is there any one thing that you'd, as they sort of summed up, that you'd throw out there?
I always think that we never expanded in any new location without having the resources in place. I think what a lot of people do is they say, oh, we'll try Russia. Or we'll try another place, but if you don't have the resources for it, players get angry. You don't hit the right marketing area. Sometimes you just miss the mark, and then it's very hard to get a second launch, right?
Yeah. Okay, no, that was good. So I wasn't expecting questions. You were very. So no questions, no further questions. Nothing else. One at the back. There you go. Thank you. Just the gentleman in the front and the gentleman at the back. Hello.
I think I've seen in one of the slides that localized LiveOps is very important. Like how do you manage? Like you have you have launched game in so many countries. How do you pull off such localized events in different areas?
We like to balance a lot of that. Like, of course, I think they brought up the perfect point in the last panel. You don't want to break the version into too many different ways. And the problem I find when you have the developer-publisher model is that, oh, this publisher needs these languages, so we need to do it in a different one. And then you end up making too many different editions. Because we're both the developer and the publisher of a lot of our games, or most of our games, when we get to that point, we try to balance that out. We don't do too many localized events for a particular location or language. We try to keep it in between. So we could go further, but in other aspects, like for example, we launched a game that's a reskin of Castle Clash in the Arabic and MENA region, as well as Turkey, and it's doing really well. So sometimes you just have to reskin. So that there's a take there. It is tough, for sure. You just don't want to go too far where you have to break the versions.
Cool. There's one more question, gentleman here on the in the middle.
For starters, if you don't have the resources to get people to translate languages for you, what kind of system or the software, the platform, the website, they provide that service so you can change the language and to be able to launch in a different country? Like a major country, for example.
We work with a lot of different translation partners. We don't do a lot of it internally. So I think that keeps costs down. Because I worked at a previous company where we actually had a full translation department. So I think the general cost of translation, you can do a first pass with a particular company. When I worked with NetDragon, we actually got a lot of our players to do it. So if you have previous games, you can give them items in your other games in order to get them to translate for you for free. But it is difficult. I think don't launch in that region if you don't have the full Because you're starting a brand, right? If they see in your English version and your French version, your Spanish version, etc., they're all different or they're differing, they actually get on forums and they do bitch at you for that. You know, you need to be, I think, more ready to have the same brand across all of your languages.
Cool. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause, please, for Andrew? Very good. You're spot on time.